All right, let me hit screen share. Well, I want to, let's see, looks like we have a good number of people. I want to um, welcome everyone to the third annual RChain General Members Meeting. And I really appreciate all the people who are here. I know many people are here in time zones that make this quite a challenge, including our illustrious board member, Steve Ross Talbot. So I want to keep everything brief. I'm just going to make a few comments with about the state of the chain. But I think we've turned a corner, although we still have some challenges in front of us. So I have to say that this has been one hell of a challenging year. And certainly, with this last fundraising effort, without the support of the members, the cooperative could not have kept going. And without the support of specific members in the cooperative community, I personally would have been at a loss to find the strength to keep going. So I really, really appreciate the support that has been given over the last year. I certainly believe that it will be worth it, and we can talk about that. But I also want to call out that the developers who've stuck with it have just been real stars, and in particular, just in the last few days, we've had this cost accounting feature which has been 6 months overdue. They brought it down to near completion, so we are just a few pull requests away from having that completed. And the details of that we've been recounting on the tech updates on the Wednesday calls. But I really, really appreciate the effort of the dev, and also with all the dev who stuck with the co-op through all the mishigosh at the beginning of the year when um, we know what happened with Casper Labs. I also need to call out the financial team, especially Lilia and Tim McCain, who's no longer with us, but Lilia and Tim and Ian have gone way above and beyond to keep the lights on. Many people deserve, mention, but in particular, Lilia and Tim and Ian have worked just around the clock. And I have to let people know that, what it's a little bit what it's like, right when the US team is knocking off for the day. Our Chinese supporters are just waking up, and about the time that they're ready to take afternoon tea time, well, the Polish team is kicking into gear. And so those of us who are managing and monitoring this, especially folks like Rao, who stepped in to fill Kelly's shoes, we have to burn things around the clock in order to manage this organization. And so my my heartfelt gratitude to everyone for helping with that. And I just want to give people a sense that if you go and you look up, the resources devoted to Libra versus the resources devoted to RChain, I think you'll see that the RChain features are far above what's going on with far above and beyond what's going on with Facebook's Libra, and yet we have far below the resources. I mean, considerably far below just the personnel resources. And in this past year, what we've seen completed and stable, you know, we've seen the not just stabilized but beginning to be optimized, the R space code. We've seen the Rolang has been stable, the communications layer has been stable. The only thing that has been in flux was the Casper and the cost accounting, and that's really very impressive. Any one of those modules would have been given a team the size of about 40, and and we've taken on all 4 of those modules with a team, a total team size in the mid 20s. So we're about 24, 25 folks at our maximum. So this is really astonishing, the amount of work that's been done with the resources that we have. And I want to take a moment just to acknowledge that work. And we are just about to enter testnet 3. I know I have been saying this for a while, but it's actually the case now. You can you can watch the check-ins, and I heartily encourage you to do that. And post that, the only thing we have to do is hardening. I mean, there's some minor work here and there, but the vast majority of the work is hardening, and we'll be devoting all of our efforts beyond the work on the cost accounting, which gets us across into the testnet 3, to hardening the network. And we already have lots and lots of data on that. We've got lots and lots of good data. And also, I want to say that we have more experience now with pure proof of stake than any other team on the planet. There are a number of issues that we've uncovered in the Casper protocol that have no mention in any of the other proof of stake discussions, but we know that they're lurking for all of them. So in particular, we know that it is very possible for the protocol to succumb to a lack of fairness, and that if you don't address fairness as a part of your liveness strategy for the protocol becomes unresponsive. And this is also related to the stake distribution and a number of other things. So we have the kind of lived experience that allows us to weigh in on proof of stake chains in a way that no one else on the planet can do. So this is, people should be really proud of that. And it means that we should be able to, bring that to bear and bring that to market in a way that none of the other teams can do. I would like to look forward a little bit. It's not okay to have really fast networks, especially networks with the smart contracting solution that don't have additional security solutions. And this is why Venus is so important, and why I'm so glad that the election results have suggested support for Venus. If we stopped at Mercury and we had the kind of transaction speeds that we're already showing, the network would be very, very dangerous. And I know many people have heard me say this, but it bears repeating. Imagine what would have happened to Ethereum and the DAO bug if Ethereum had been running at 40,000 transactions per second. Right. And now remind yourself that that bug was in smart contracting code. And then think about what it means for there to be smart contracting capability. The ability to write smart contracts is open to the entire internet. Any developer with a bright idea can write smart contracts. So that means they're not a part of the core protocol team. They haven't been vetted. They're not going through the same kinds of quality assurance mechanisms that the core protocol team is doing. But in fact, they are. They're like many developers, excited about the new technology and just beginning to develop. So what kind of security exposure does that mean for a proof of stake chain that has smart contracting capability? That is the largest security exposure. And it's something I've been talking about for a very long time now. And without some mechanism to address that security exposure, having blockchain transaction rates in the tens of thousands is actually very, 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 did I say very? It's very dangerous. And that's another reason why RChain is differentiated. And I'm looking forward to the development of the behavioral type system for Rolang to provide that. I'm also looking forward to improving the Rolang experience. Just this spring, we identified 3 key language features that we show should reduce the size of Rolang programs considerably, by a factor of 3 or more. And also at the same time, provide a wedge to do some considerable optimization. So that's another key important feature that will go into Venus and dovetail also with the behavioral types. And also, I do want to give a shout out to the more the wider, bigger horizons, and that is that the ladle work has continued. And I just want to differentiate for people who maybe don't understand. There is a distinction between ladle and the behavioral types for Rolang. So the behavioral types for Rolang were published and vetted in the ETEPS conference, the Trustworthy Global Computing subcommittee of the prestigious ETEPS conference in 2005. So almost 15 years ago. And there have been implementations of it for almost as long. So that is ready and specified, well specified and peer reviewed and ready to go to production. So that's not what's going on with Ladle. What Ladle does is to recognize that underneath the behavioral types for Rolang is a much deeper, much broader algorithm. And that research for specifying that algorithm in its full generality so that it can apply to many, many things has been ongoing. We haven't stopped that research. And we've made leaps and bounds with respect to that research. I heartily recommend that people take a listen to this week's RCast if you want to learn more about that. Just as a quick foreshadowing of what can happen with Ladle. Ladle applies to a wide range of systems and not just programming systems. In particular, you can apply ladle to algebras that allow us to reason about geometry. As an example, the Clifford algebras have been hailed over the last 20 years as very, very having high utility for capturing and computing geometric information. So much so that they've been, really touted by both the physics community, which has to reason a lot about geometry, and the computer graphics community, which has to reason about geometry. And you can take the Clifford algebras and run ladle on those things. And what you get out, the corresponding type system for that geometric information allows you to give a query language for geometry. So if you think about the kinds of applications that might need a query language for geometry, that includes self-driving cars, just as one example. It also includes protein folding as another example. So these are the kinds of markets that Ladle opens up for technologies that RChain might push in the future. I also want to talk a little bit, just briefly, about the reality of something like a decentralized Facebook, which is no longer such a wild-eyed idea when you see Facebook itself beginning to contemplate blockchain technologies. So if you just run the numbers very, very quickly, what you'll see is that in a realistic setting, every post on Facebook or every post on Instagram or every post on Snapchat, those become their own smart contracts or instances of a smart contract. And the likes and other support that they collect as they make their rounds through various users' feeds can and should be collected in wallets associated with those posts. So let's think about that. Let's imagine that every post in Facebook is actually an instance of a smart contract. And now, how many users does Facebook have? Facebook has billions of users. And each user has a feed that's over 100,000 posts deep. Right? So we're talking quadrillions of instances of smart contracts running. Now, is there any, even when we deliver transactions at 40,000 transactions per second, transaction throughputs at 40,000 transactions per second, does that even touch that kind of computational load? Not even close. Not even close. So what's the real roadmap? So the roadmap, again, is, as I've said before, it must include hardware. This is why the emphasis on the row calculus has been so key. The row calculus doesn't just give us a model of compute for the blockchain. It also gives us a model of compute that we can take down to the chip layer. So in 2002, 2003, I worked with a team to deliver a Pi calculus chip. And last year, my son and I came up with a rough sketch of a design for a row calculus chip. Now, this is the direction. Now, with such hardware, you can get row calculus executions, again, 3 orders of magnitude faster than they currently execute. And that's already 3 orders of magnitude faster than we're seeing with the existing blockchains. So, and then so what that does is it makes consensus be the bottleneck. So the next piece of the puzzle, the next thing on the roadmap that you have to hold in your mind along with me here is, what do we do to reduce the time on consensus? So it turns out that quantum computing, like Google just announced the breakthrough with quantum computing. Well, those results are still decades away from practical applications. However, there are practical applications of quantum computing to consensus that are much closer in, if we are to believe the guidance of quantum researchers like Bob Kuka and others. And that would provide a consensus architecture that essentially takes no time. Consensus would be removed as the bottleneck in the performance. And now we are within striking distance of the kind of compute platform that could actually support a decentralized Facebook. So this is the, and if you think about what I've said, all of the pieces of the RChain architecture are all there in support of this roadmap. They're all there to try to provide this kind of infrastructure and within a time frame that still matches what we need to do in order to create coordination technology that will meet what's happening with respect to climate change. So I've said it over and over and over again, but we must coordinate better and faster. And what RChain is doing is contemplating real architectures that will enable that kind of coordination. That's the vision, that's the dream, and the technologies that we're putting in place. I know it's a long, tough slog, but the technologies we're putting in place are practical steps towards that vision and that dream. So with that, let me turn it over to Steve Ross Talbot and let him speak to you about the election results. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Greg. So welcome everybody. Just to let you know, it is 3 o'clock in the morning, nearly 3:30 in the morning UK time. But fortunately, I got up slightly earlier than the kickoff time for this meeting, so I am awake. So I'm going to share my screen and show you what the results were of the elections. So let me just go to share here. That one. So I'm hoping that I'm sharing my screen now, which means you should see the agenda. And now we've got the results. So there was the balloting of members for non-exec directors, and there were 6 nominees who were presented to the membership, along with video Q&A, myself included. And the results of all of that are in. There was the possibility that candidates would not win a board seat because more people voted against them than for them. That actually didn't happen. So, and we did deliberate a lot in the governance committee and on the board to figure out what the right protocol was in the event of things like ties and the like. Unfortunately, none of that happened. So all the things that we put in place to make sure that we could have an effective and smooth election and came out with nominees who would be awarded board positions as non-execs. We didn't have any of the issues that we had looked at. And the final results are Eric, myself and Steve Henley have been awarded 3-year terms. Dan, Evan and Daryl have been awarded 2-year terms. The actual number of votes that were cast, yes votes that were cast, were pretty high given the number of people that voted for all of the nominees from so Eric, myself, Steve Henley, Dan, Evan and Daryl. All of us got quite a lot of votes. So a lot of people, quite a few people of the people that actually did respond to the ballot voted in favour of all of these candidates. And all of this is published in the GitHub, so you'll be able to have a look at that. So we've now got 6 members that hopefully will join the next board meeting after this AGM. I'm looking forward to working with each and every one of those, and I'm sure that the same is true for Greg and Ian, and all the other existing board members. So as I scroll down, I'm just going to come to GP001. So the famous GP001. I just want to tell you a bit about the history of this. So I first came across GP001 when I was in RChain Europe, and this was an issue about having processes in place that would enable the members to raise important topics of discussion to ensure that the co-op adequately represents the membership on a continuous basis. Because as you can imagine, when you have a cooperative and you're seeking to be decentralized, truly decentralized organizationally, it's impossible to do that on day one. You have to iterate towards this notion of decentralized organization. And there are many people in the world that have gone on record of talking about this, and perhaps the most interesting one is the guy that actually started Extinction Rebellion, who talks about how he moved to a decentralized model. And GP001 is our attempt, the members' attempt, in fact, at trying to lay down some ground rules as to how we ensure greater participation and transparency of member voices over and above having an AGM or over and above having a special AGM, because those are the kind of, the special AGMs are nuclear options. And you don't really want to be doing that. So we as a cooperative, those of us on the board and on the governance committee, very much want to ensure that we can have wider participation. So GP001 is a way of encoding that wider participation so that the board and all of the other parts of the co-op can be held accountable by the members in terms of topics that need to be discussed, whatever they may be. It could be a major issue that may cause some systemic drop in the way in which crypto and blockchain based organizations are seen, or it could be something internal that somebody wants to raise. But essentially GP001, which is out there and you can have a look at it, is an attempt at doing that. And it's not the end of it. One of the things that we took out, oddly enough, is there was some wording in GP001 about an arbitration process in the event that members raise a topic of discussion and it isn't dealt with properly. And we took that out because we realized we didn't have an arbitration process. So right on top of the list of the governance committee is to put an arbitration process together that makes sense within the context of being a cooperative and being a decentralizing cooperative over time. So we're expecting to come out with potentially an addition or an amendment to GP001 that has the arbitration process. And we were willing to put this to the membership, and I'm really glad that the membership, 92.7% of the vote was what GP001 got. I'm really glad that it got that vote. And the governance committee will then work on putting the arbitration process together. And we didn't need that up front because at the moment we don't have any topics of discussion that would arise out of GP001. We're hoping to have some very, very soon. So one of the one of the topics of discussion may well be the arbitration process itself. So having put GP001 out there, having liaised within the governance committee with a whole bunch of members over quite a period of time, GP001 found its way to this AGM and onto the ballot, and thank you, members, for your vote of confidence in GP001, but it is your work. Very important to understand that GP001 was not done in isolation, wasn't done in a dark cupboard. It was done in the public gaze and had huge input from members from all over the place. So that's the GP001. The other thing that the governance committee and the board wanted to do was, sometimes it might feel like the board is this weird organization that seemingly is disconnected from the members. GP001 is an attempt by members to rein that in, to stop that. The survey is an attempt, oddly enough, by the governance committee and the board to do it the other way around, to say, look, members, we really want to know what you think. Not a lot of point being a representative and getting voted onto a board if you're not listening to the members. So it's, and that's not always pleasant to hear, and it certainly hasn't over the last year. It's been a pretty rocky road. So we started to think about what did we really want to get from the members in terms of a steer. Now, it's a non-binding vote, so it's not like, oh well, because this one won over that one, this is what's going to happen. What we wanted was sentiment. What was the co-op thinking? What were the members thinking? And then to take that and encourage the board and other parts of the co-op to take that on board in the deliberations and the decision making that goes forward, and to be able to then refer back to it to say, well, we made this decision because this is what the members said. And if we decide not to go with that, or anyone at any point in the co-op decides not to follow the member sentiment, it needs to be justified. There has to be a really good reason for not doing it, just as there needs to be lineage back to a decision that allegedly supports what the members say in their sentiment, and that lineage can be shown. So we put this survey out there to get an understanding of what it is the members really want to do. And, you know, to be honest, I must say that I'm delighted with the result, that by and large, 58% of the co-op members that voted would prefer the direction to be in the direction of Venus, as Greg has mentioned. I didn't expect that. So I'm really happy with that personally, because I think you need to have a bar that you're going to aspire to. And I think that getting Venus out there is a bar that we can aspire to for all the reasons that Greg mentioned, as we seek to turn this on and have this thing really scale. And I can tell you from the conversations that I've been having over the last couple of weeks with a number of people in the crypto and blockchain world, if we actually, well, I'm not going to say if, when we go live, even without all of the features of Venus, when people start to see the scale, that opens eyes. The reason why Venus for me was really important, and I did vote in favor of it, was it precisely what Greg said. And I'll tell you one small story. There was a big microservice release project here in the UK. It was a big bank. They had refactored their entire banking software as a set of microservices away from sort of a more centralized mainframe monolith approach. And they'd done everything that they thought was correct. And then they went live. And within 24 hours of going live, they pretty much brought the entire bank to a standstill. And they took about 3 months to recover. And that was simply because they had not understood the complexities of scaling a large body of individual microservices that interact. The more you interact, the more distributed you are, the higher the propensity for nasty little bugs to creep in. And the impact is that people were locked out of their account and could not actually trade. So I couldn't emphasize more strongly than Greg already has of the importance of some of the features in Venus to ensure that doesn't happen as RChain scales. So I was really happy to see that. Now, there were a number of comments, because we also put a comment thing into the survey, but on the basis that we've only just got the comments today, I'm not going to go through the comments, but what I will do is I want to do some analysis of the comments rather than just tell you what the comments are. You all individually know what comments or suggestions you made, but we have not, the governance committee and the board in particular, we haven't had time to look at those comments, and there's some detailed ones. So we want to go and look over those, and we will report back through Discord and other means on what it is we find, and we will publish those comments. So there's nothing to hide. It's just that we don't really have anything to say about them yet. So I think that's all of my duties for this AGM discharged, except for one, which is to introduce Jackie from Ledger Pro, who has been an absolute brick in ensuring that we have some financial reports and financial data upon which to make decisions. So I will hand over to Jackie.
Thank you. So I'm going to let him unshare his screen. And then I am going to share the financial statements, which I believe someone posted, so you can review on your own in more detail. I'm just going to hit some highlights. Figure out what I'm sharing. There it is. Okay. So we're going to start with the P&L, and the main things to note here is that although there is some income associated with the sale and transfer and use of cryptocurrency, the majority of what's going on is expenses at this point. And you can look where I'm going to look at the bottom line really quick. Hopefully don't make anybody dizzy. And down at the bottom, you can see about an $8.5 million loss. And I want to point out that a majority of that actually comes from this capital gains and loss in the first quarter. And there are two main things that go into that, neither of them operational. There was a sale of property and a loss on some purchased Spark. So both of those are non-operational. They do affect the bottom line. That's where a large portion of that comes from. But what we really kind of want to focus on here are the operational expenses. And we can see here that the majority of the expense by far comes from manpower, between the contractors up near the top of this page, and then wages near the bottom. Like I said, by far the largest percent, the bulk of the expenses. You can see that in the first quarter, both of those were much larger than the rest of the year. That included a lot more manpower. That has reduced quite a bit the rest of the year. But even going from second quarter to third quarter, those costs have continued to reduce. There is, just because it looks a little strange and out there, I'll point out there was a payroll correction that happened. So you'll see the taxes even out here over the year, but there's a little quarter to quarter difference there in that. But what that shows is, again, in your largest expense, but then comes down to the total expenses have reduced quarter over quarter through the year here. So for a total of just under 5 million in expenses for 3 quarters of the year. So now I'm going to flip over to the balance sheet and show you here. There's again, with the operation of this particular type of company, you'll see there are some assets in cash and crypto equivalents, but the majority of balances that are on here are in other assets and other liabilities that all have to do with cryptocurrencies or in the formation. And what happens a little bit from a tax standpoint is that expenses and income that have to do with the creation of this process until the mainnet is launched, is that a lot of that gets deferred. And so that's what you see a lot in these other assets, is you see some assets having to do with the process of creating the platform, as well as some investments. And then down in the liabilities, reflecting the same from up above in the assets, you see in some deferred revenue, in both cases, from the platform in progress, as well as some of the purchase of long-term assets to do with that. So it's a little different than some other industries, but again, what you see is the assets and the liabilities are in these long-term locations, and they're being deferred from the P&L. And then again, the important thing about, or the big parts of that P&L are in the manpower categories, and that those categories are driving a lowering of expenses as those lower over the year. And there's a lot of categories there, and like I said, I do believe someone said that was uploaded, so you can look at those in more detail. And if there's any questions there, those can be addressed. And I think that's pretty much all I have to say in a very general look at those. So I believe we're going back to Greg, is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's back to you, Greg.
Sorry, I was muted. I was yammering away, and I was muted. Okay, there we go. So in terms of closing comments, you know, one of the things that I think is so important is what we do with hardship. I think so much of the co-op has been, you know, it's wonderful to work side by side when things are going our way, but we really begin to learn, you know, the true mettle of an organization or an individual when things are not going our way. And I guess I'm really, really proud of the community here, especially those who have really stuck with it and stuck through it, and shown their mettle when things aren't going our way. And I think this is really just the beginning. I mean, for me, when I look out into the future and I look at the kinds of things that we're going to be facing, and you know, you don't have to trust me, you can just go look at the data. When I look at the kinds of things that we're going to be facing, things are not going to be going our way. And so part of RChain is not about technology. It's about building a network of people that we can trust. You know, and I think if we were in a physical room together, I would suggest that we all look at each other and say, these are the people that, you know, we've begun to prove to each other that we can trust each other. And I hope that that's what we really begin to scale, is that network of people that we know we've got each other's backs. And you know, that's, even more than all of the excellent technical work and all of the good organizational work and the work on governance and many other key points that have happened over the last 3 years. This one thing, that these are the people here who know what it means to stick it out and stick together and make something happen. And I think that's all I wanted to say for this evening. So at this point, we can take questions, I think.
Greg, are we taking them on the live stream? Is it defined to ask, like, can we ask any questions that we?
It's just the people here in the Zoom.
Okay,
No,
so
we're not taking them from the live stream. Just
Oh.
here in the Zoom, and then again, there'll be the Q&A session tomorrow,
Okay.
which will give people time to digest what we've presented, and then they can ask questions there, and it'll be like, this is public forum, so we have to kind of curtail any questions that of a sensitive nature.
Okay, so I'm gonna assume the live stream can keep rolling then.
Sure.
Okay, so the first question I have, and again, if you don't want to answer this because of the live stream, that's okay. How are the assets of Reflective Ventures valued, or claimed to that transaction valued at all when that is now a separate entity? It seems to, like, how can we have a claim on those assets?
It was always a separate entity. And the claim has to do with the contractual relationship between the two entities.
Yeah, is it based off like what we entered the agreement on? Because
yes, we entered into
okay.
an agreement and we gave them a bunch of money,
Right.
And they spent all of that, and we've come up with nothing.
I see. Okay. The second question I have is the private sales to co-op members have been occurring over the last years. Have we taken capital losses based off the price of the token, the original price of the token that were sold to private investors in 2017?
Yes, I'm not a tax accountant, but it seems fair to say that we have clearly taken a capital loss.
Okay. Yeah, because I just want to make sure that that loss is based off the prices of 2017, because that was the original sale price. So, because I'm not sure how you're averaging that in that form that was just produced.
Again, I'm not a tax accountant,
Okay.
but we do have people working on that.
Okay. Yeah, I have other questions, but they're technical and they can be taken offline.
Okay. Any other questions from folks in the community? Going once.
Okay, I have a question about testnet 3. Will we have the testnet 3 before the November?
That's the current best estimate. I can't, the code goes as fast as the code goes, but that's the current best estimate.
Okay, and then I have a question for Steve Ross. How about your planning for the winners?
It's coming along, and I'm hoping to publish some ideas out. But in order to put together a business strategy, you need to understand what your cost base is, how your cost base may change as RChain starts to scale, and modeling that along with things like getting more validators that are external, and therefore the business model around that. So there is an investment sort of, for want of a better term, working group, an investor sort of relations working group that's been set up, and we definitely would like people to help us on that particular working group come up with ideas as to how we can market ourselves. Yeah, Greg's always a wealth of information about some of this stuff, and it's always worth going back to Greg. But the collective intelligence of the RChain co-op is huge and remains largely untapped. So that working group that's been set up has been a joy to be part of initially, and getting to understand each other and where we're coming from. So there's nothing firm yet, but I would anticipate in the course of the next week to 2 weeks, there will be bits of information that then get shared on Discord and published potentially in the GitHub, that start to lay down some direction for that business strategy. But equally, we need the membership to give us that collective wisdom. Now that was partly why we did the sentiment questionnaire, because in putting together the business strategy, I needed to understand, well, what do the members want? Because, I could have just gone down the road of Venus and said, well, this is what we should do. But I didn't do that deliberately. I held back from doing that because I have heard members say, well, I think we should just do Mercury and go live. I've even heard people say, I think we should do Mercury into mainnet, but not actually go live, just become a kind of an open source organization, a bit sort of like a Red Hat organization. So I've heard different sentiments from the community itself. So coming up with a business strategy in a co-op where the members are everything, as Greg said, the members of this co-op are everything. The members have saved this co-op. So it's really important to give voice to the membership and to represent the members' wishes. It's not about what any of us individually want. It really is about the membership. So it's a bit like being a politician in some respects, or at least hopefully a politician that you can trust, as opposed to the plethora of politicians you can't. So that's kind of where we are on the business strategy. We've got a lot of inputs, and I think we've crossed. We're kind of going. We went divergent. Now we're starting to look at convergence, and in doing so, we will start to publish back to the community what our findings are and how we see things, and how we're going to scale this out with a business roadmap to follow that maps closely to the technology roadmap that includes the features of Venus. That's a bit of a rambling answer, Eric, but that's where we are.
Yes,
All
thank
right,
you.
so if no one else is going to ask this question, I guess I will. So somebody needs to ask the very expensive question. If the members voted and they passed the vote to do Venus, how much is Venus going to cost? And I know that you can't necessarily give us a definite answer to this, but can you at least give us a ballpark estimate for the amount of money that is going to be needed to hire 25, 30, 40 devs for 3 years?
I can kind of give you some vague figures of that. Bear with me because I'm looking them up. And this is one of the things that I want to sort of publish as well that has these figures. So it ranges. So if you include an initial go live mainnet set of servers, say 20 servers to give it sufficient scale, and you look at it on a monthly burn rate, right? So think of it as a monthly burn rate. It ranges from about, if you add all the dev costs, the operational costs. So if you only did Mercury to mainnet and carried on for a year, the burn rate is about about $700,000 a month, right? That's the monthly cost. That includes all the hardware as well. At this point, if you look at doing high growth, so that would include not just Venus, but the sort of marketing side that you need and the operational marketing uplift that we would need. It could be somewhere around about $1.5 million per month. So it's of that nature in terms of the costs. What we then have to do is map those costs over time. There's 12 months in a year. It may not. It's not like you suddenly have, if it's $1.5 million for the high figure versus $700,000 for the low figure. It's not like you're suddenly at 1.5 million. So there is a trajectory. So based on what the members' wishes are, it's somewhere between the two of those. We can pare things away. We can optimize certain things. There's not a lot to optimize now. So that's kind of what we're looking at. But I don't think, I mean, at the moment with the investment, the investor relations investor working group, we are looking at creative ways to provide us with some mechanisms for raising that money from members, possibly by increasing membership, so other new members that come in. So, and part of the battle of doing that is giving them a reason to effectively invest their resources, to invest their time, to invest their efforts into RChain. So we need to have very crisp messaging, and we need to be very targeted at who we go to. And the first part was, what are the costs? What are the real costs? And that we kind of got a handle on. Now we need to balance that with, aspirationally, where does the revenue come? So what does RChain, the RChain co-op take in? And what do validators who are not part of that, so if it's not their own validators, what do they get as we scale? And one of the key things, I mean, this is, and you'll start to see this in the stuff that gets published out during the course of the next couple of weeks. I kind of wanted to look at it in terms of adoption rates. So if you think about Visa as an example, in Visa, each customer does about 1.5, they do roughly 1.5 transactions a day, or roughly 44 transactions a month. And that's of the 3.3 billion customers, right? So, and that supports the 40 to 50,000 transactions per second. If you then look at RChain and you look at the scale, and the one thing that really is tricky for people sometimes is to appreciate the scale. Doing 40,000 transactions per second is a huge, huge number, right? And when you put that in and you start running models, then you've got to ask yourself the question, how fast can I get customers, how fast can I get people onto the network to generate that many transactions a second? And then you can, I've used the Visa figures of 44 per month or 1.5 per day, and then figured out, well, how many new people do I need coming through my network in order to generate that many transactions? Just using the Visa numbers at this point. And that becomes quite interesting, because in my experience, building a business, and I did put that in the blurb for my nomination, building a business and scaling it, particularly scaling it, is one of the most challenging things to do. To be honest, doing the tech in some respects is the easier road. Getting people onto the platform generating the transaction flow based upon doing potentially 40,000 transactions a second. It's the acquisition of those that's the key. And any investor or any interested party that buys into the RChain technology, that's what they'll be looking at too. How do you acquire that many people, and how long will it take? So then you've got to balance that against the costs. So when we look at $700,000 a month versus maybe $1.5 million a month, you know, that's, you're basically racking up debt at the end of the day until you've got some revenue coming in at the other side. So then it's a case of balancing that out and then looking at what point does the co-op become self-sustaining? And all the efforts of the investor working group and the efforts that I started doing before that group came into being, that's kind of what we're looking at. We're looking at where's that point, because we want to be able to publish that out to everybody and say, well, here's the point, and this is how many customers we would need in order to generate that revenue that makes us self-sustaining. Does that give you a bit more clarity?
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Steve.
It's amazing what I can say at 4 in the morning. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Yeah. Going once. Twice. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for coming to the meeting, and with that, the meeting is officially closed, and onward to the